Welcome everybody to Webinar Wednesday at Sight and Sound Technology, a social distancing special. What an event this has proven to be. Lots of people getting in touch with us, lots of people wanting to come to this event and find out how a new type of normal post-COVID-19 is going to impact on your daily life as somebody with sight loss. My name is Stuart Lawler. I work for Sight and Sound Technology. My colleagues Glenn Tukey and Carl Brealey are also in the room with us. And they'll be helping us as we run through the session here this afternoon. Before we get started, just a couple of things that you may wish to know. We welcome your input, and indeed we've been saying it over the last week or so, probably more than any other time. This is the topic that has engaged and energized most of you, and we welcome your input today. You can do so on Zoom if you're on Windows by using the chat function, which you can access by pressing Alt and H. If you're using a Mac, it's Command and H, or if you're on one of the mobile platform apps, you can press the chat button, which is usually located under the More Options tab on your phone. If you wish to raise your hand, and we have limited time for people to make comments, but we'll do our best to get you in. If you wish to raise your hand, you can press Alt and Y on Windows, or Command Y on the Mac, or on the mobile platform, you can activate the raise hand on your phone. And Carl and Glenn will be keeping an eye on the raised hands, and we will have lots of time to get to your comments and questions as we go through the session. So this is Webinar Wednesday. Just to say, it is a regular slot in Sight and Sound Technology in our diary. Every Wednesday afternoon, we've been doing this since the start of COVID-19. We choose a different topic and we talk about technology and all sorts of exciting stuff. If you'd like to know more about Webinar Wednesday and you want to hear what's coming up, then please make sure you get in touch with us and follow us, of course, on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook, and our blog on our website, sightandsound.co.uk. Now, before we start the session proper, just under 2 weeks ago, our CEO and myself had a bit of a chat about what is social distancing, and I was making the comment that I hadn't been in a shop on my own in I think 2 months, and suddenly here we are planning a session about it. So I want to introduce our CEO, Mr. Glenn Tukey, who's been extremely supportive in facilitating and allowing this session to take place, and just ask Glenn to give us just a couple of words by way of welcoming you to today's session. Glenn.
Thank you, Stuart. I just wanted to say myself, repeat Stuart's welcome. It's so good to see so many people interested in what I think is about the most important topic probably on the planet at the moment. This is obviously very much focused on people with visual impairment, and it's really, really tough if you have no sight to social distance. But it's an issue for the whole planet, not just in physicality, but in mental health and anxiety as well. This really is, I think, the touch word. And I know we're going to go around the panel, and I must say thank you very much for our 8 panelists we have here with us today. My touch point is what is a reasonable adjustment in the new normal. I think as an employer, it's one of the things that's taxing me most. So I'd be very interested as we go through this and listen to the panel and what their thinking is. But I've got to ready my workplace and look after my customers and suppliers going forwards in a new normal. So how do I do that for people with visual impairment? I've got some ideas, but I'm sure I'll learn some more from today. So anyway, welcome, and we hope you enjoy the time that you're with us.
All right, thank you, Glenn. Just to say, I suppose there are so many questions and everybody has so many thoughts about how this new normal will work. What is social distancing? How will it work for me? How are we all going to manage in queues and train stations and airports and going out for a walk? All these things that we took for granted prior to COVID-19. And I suppose the answer is none of us know. And our panel certainly don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. Glenn hasn't all the answers. No one has all the answers. So today is about peer learning. It's about talking and exploring the challenges that we find ourselves in, and let's see as a group what collective things we can come up with by the end of the session. Now, Glenn mentioned our panelists. We have wonderful people who, and by the way, I have to say, when I asked each of them without hesitation, whether it be phone or email or WhatsApp conversations and all sorts of stuff going on over the last 10 days, they were like, absolutely. So I want to thank every one of our panelists for their time. I've asked the panelists to just say a few words by way of saying who they are. And I'm going to start with Kevin Kelly from the National Council for the Blind of Ireland, just down the road from where I'm sitting here. So Kevin, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Stuart. Delighted to be here. My name's Kevin Kelly. I'm the head of advocacy with NCBI, which is the National Sight Loss Agency in the Republic of Ireland. I'm blind myself, so I've been living with the reality of COVID-19 and the various restrictions over the last 10 or 11 weeks in the Republic of Ireland, and trying to raise these issues with government agencies and health officials. Physical or social distancing is something which is pretty much impossible for people who are blind and vision impaired. And I'm not sure what the situation was in the UK, but certainly in the Republic of Ireland thus far, whilst we've done a relatively good job of managing and controlling the disease, unfortunately people with disabilities, and in particular people who are blind and vision impaired, haven't been to the forefront of decision makers' mind, because a lot of the solutions that have been put in to allow us to function are very sight or visual focused, whether that be markings on the ground outside shops or in stores or signage in stores. So I think over the next few weeks and months, because unfortunately physical and social distancing is with us, we're going to have to look at more innovative ways to include people with sight loss, to allow us to go back and live our lives as much as possible. So lots of challenges, and lots of people who are blind and vision impaired have shared their experiences to date, and I'm looking forward to hearing other people's perspectives today, because I think an opportunity like this will allow us all to learn and develop, and I don't think there's anything like a bad suggestion.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Kevin. I'm looking forward to hearing lots more from you as we go through the session. Now, we're going over to the UK and Taylor McCaffrey, who's an orientation and mobility instructor. Taylor, good afternoon.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks. Yeah, my name is Taylor McCaffrey. I am an orientation and mobility specialist for the Southampton team of guide dogs. And as an instructor, I think the way it's affecting me going forward right now, and everybody at Guide Dogs, is not being able to be out teaching. And, you know, we're definitely missing all of our learners. And we're also in the process, while we can't be out physically teaching, trying to discover ways of, in the future, being able to safely return to services, whether that be through technology or any other system. So yeah, that's where we are.
Thanks very much, Taylor. And indeed, big challenges around, as you said, getting back and providing your trainings. Interested to chat about some of those later on. Right, Victoria Alvis is living in Longford. We're whizzing back across the Irish Sea to Victoria. Victoria, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Stuart. Thank you for having me today. My name is Victoria. I am 20. I'm going to be starting college this year. So I'm here to represent the student body and talk about the effects of how social distancing will impact students, especially who are blind, and how all that's going to work, hopefully.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Victoria. Very much looking forward to hearing lots more from you during the afternoon. And we're going back over to the UK and saying hello to Matthew Clark. Good afternoon, Matthew.
Afternoon, and thank you for having me. Can I be heard? I'm not seeing my picture.
You can, yeah, we can
hear
you.
Great. So I am normally based in Glasgow, Scotland, where I work for Zurich Insurance and have done for the last 18 months. Prior to that, I studied at New College, Worcester, went to the University of Glasgow, and have stuck around in the Dear Green place ever since. Coronavirus for me most immediately was work from home, but be completely socially isolated as I live alone. And I have traded now the independence that I was able to keep in Glasgow and managed to use my local supermarket still for the lack of independence but social company of my family down in the southeast of England, which more immediately has been a great trade for my well-being. But working from home without all of our adjustments is very difficult during coronavirus. And my concern now is, when will that time come that I can get enough social contact back in my independent life back in Glasgow to return to that? And what is the future of work going to look like for me in my current job, but work look like for new jobs for other people, for my peers as well?
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. And so many questions there, and I think things are going around in all our minds at the moment. Okay, we're going over to the northwest of Ireland. I feel like I'm in the Eurovision Song Contest, calling the jury or something, by the way. We're going back to the northwest of Ireland and Sligo and Jackie McBrearty. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Stuart. Thanks so much for having me on. Yeah, my name's Jackie. I'm a guide dog owner from Sligo. This whole coronavirus has completely impacted what I normally do. Me and the dog would normally be outside in and out of shops, 10 kilometers up a day. But since this started, it would have been, I'm going out less than 2 kilometers. I have lost my nerve. I am scared of public transport. I got an appointment today for the hospital later tonight, and I cancelled it because of the sheer fear of getting on a bus and going to Donegal, and that I haven't been. But I was in town for the first time today in 10 weeks with a member of the Gardaí, the Irish Police Service, and anxiety wouldn't have been a word for it before I left the house because of the change to Tesco and the town, basically.
Okay, Jackie, thank you very much, and major things to think about there. Now, Asosa Okuro is in Dublin. Asosa, you're very welcome, and you have a really interesting take on this because you're from the medical area, medical background. We're not hearing Asosa?
I think they might be muted. Hang on.
Oh, Carl's gonna, we will get Asosa in just one moment. So Asosa is coming to this from a medical background. Asosa, are you hearing us?
Asosa, if you are, I think you may have to unmute yourself.
I definitely feel like I'm on the Eurovision.
Yeah, while we're doing that, Victoria, your audio is a little bit muffled as well, so maybe you could...
I think that was Jackie, actually, Glenn, not Victoria. It was Jackie who
sorry,
just spoke.
Jackie. Sorry,
yeah.
It's Jackie. Yes, it's Jackie. You're slightly muffled, Jackie.
Okay.
So maybe
Victoria's yeah, you sound better already, Jackie.
And while we're just waiting for Asosa to come in, if anybody does want to ask a question, can you please make sure you ask it to all panelists and attendees? Because otherwise we are the only ones that are actually seeing the questions coming in. So there will be random answers appearing in the chat box. So if you just make sure you click all panelists and attendees when you're asking a question, please.
Yeah, so there is a little drop down where you can click panelists or attendees. Let's go to Daniel. We'll come back in a minute. So Daniel is in Leeds, works for the Royal National Institute for the Blind as an eye clinic liaison officer. Daniel, you're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yes, so yeah, as Stuart said, I work as an ECLO for the R9B. It's definitely going to be a whole new way of working for us, especially being in the hospitals and things, because again, there's that social distancing. It's also going to be able to see how the ways of working that they're going to implement in the hospitals as well. It's also been very interesting for me because during this coronavirus outbreak, I've switched from a different job into this job. So the whole process of recruitment and induction and things, that's all been done virtually. So that was a new experience, and obviously learning systems remotely. But from a personal perspective, one thing that I'm definitely wondering how is going to work is train travel. I like to travel a lot. There's not a weekend where I don't like to be out and about. I'm very much out and about all the time. And it's like little things. So in terms of rail assistance, things like that, whether the person has to, whether they can still, you can be guided with sighted guide, or whether they have to do a different method. Like, this is all a new thing, and it's going to be interesting to see the way that it's done.
Thanks very much, Daniel. Yeah, they're so important, aren't they? And I travel a lot like you for work, and I fly a lot, and I miss seeing Glenn and Carl. I want to see them again soon, so I hope I'll get to fly and see them soon in the UK. Let's go back to Asosa if we can. I don't know if Asosa is unmuted or not.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Hi, Asosa, we hear you. So thank you for joining us, and you have an interesting take on this.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. My name is Asosa, and I'm a client of the NCBI in Dublin. I'm visually impaired. I trained as a physician.
Quiet.
More specifically, I trained as a general surgeon, but I'm going to reach back into the distant past and see if I have any public health knowledge left that can help answer questions people might have.
Fantastic, Asosa. It's great to have you here. And I know we're going to talk in a few minutes with you in particular about the need for social distancing and why medical, we're hearing all sorts of things at the moment in the news about 1 meter and 2 meters and this R rate, which I have to say I'm still getting my own head around. So we'll come back to your medical knowledge for that. Now, sure. Tom and Laura, these guys come as a pair. I'm not sure which of you wants to speak first. We go ladies first, maybe Laura and Tom from Rambletag up in Scotland. Do you want to just give a quick introduction, Laura?
Yeah, hi, thank you for having us. So I'm Laura and Tom is my neighbour and he's blind. So we came up with an idea just at the end of 2018. We launched it, the Rambletag guidance aid, which is a little harness that's worn around typically around the upper arm of a guide, and it offers an alternative to linking arms or holding the elbow or traditional methods. So we launched it for reasons that were nothing to do with COVID. But as time's gone on throughout this, we've got a lot of people coming to us and finding that they're liking it as an option of just keeping that wee bit more personal space, maybe easier to clean, or if a stranger's helping them or they're going to work and they need to get taxis and taken from their taxi to their workplace. You know, it's an alternative to just offer that wee bit of extra space. I don't want to say too much because Tom's going to fill you in a wee bit about public transport, which some of you have already addressed, and working with young kids and guiding them and things. So I'll pass it over to him and let him sort of give you a wee overview of what's happened since.
Thanks, Laura, and good afternoon, Tom.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting us on. I really hopefully maybe like to come in maybe with start with a solution to what's going on in view of the circumstances with the COVID pandemic. It really, you can't guide a blind person without that close proximity, and I would suggest that any key or frontline worker who had been issued with a Rambletag is probably the safest and best option that's available to us just now.
Okay, thank you very much, Tom. And we're going to talk lots more about Rambletag later. I had the pleasure, by the way, of trying this in Glasgow Airport a couple of times, and it's a great experience, I have to say. So it's really good. So that is our panel. You can see the breadth of knowledge on our panel, and again, we're very grateful to all these guys for joining us. Now, Asosa, I'm going to go back to you for a minute, because we've all been hearing about COVID-19. It's nothing but COVID-19 for the last 10 or 11 weeks. And I'm the kind of guy who, I guess old habits die hard. I'm not sure what it's going to be like for me to be able to link someone and walk alongside somebody if I need a bit of help in the future. Why is there this big need medically for social distancing? What is the risks around the spread of the virus? Do we need to unmute Asosa?
No, he should be fine.
Oh. Okay, let's we'll come back to Asosa. Hold tight on that one, Asosa. We'll come back to that. Let's go to Taylor for a sec, because Taylor, one of the things you and I spoke about by phone last week, and you've touched on it already in your intro, was just how social distancing will impact on your practice as an orientational and tutor, mobility tutor, and how I suppose you will have to I suppose, maybe rethink the ways in which you use what might have been traditional teaching techniques, and you've been exploring different uses of technology, haven't you?
Yeah, I think, like many other professions and areas, we're all having to come together at Guide Dogs and kind of say, how do we keep doing this? Both, how do we continue with our orientation and mobility services, but also how does our My Guide program keep going? How does our, even Dogs on Class, how does that keep going? And so we've really looked at a lot of different options, and we don't have an answer yet, but what we are really interested in is how technology might be able to help us with this. And we have a group of very smart people who are their interests lie in technology and assistive technology, and we've all been trialing different pieces and seeing how that can allow us to get back to face-to-face teaching, because as of right now, all of our face-to-face services are suspended. And we're looking at everything from apps to Bluetooth to anything that we can come across in our research.
And I'm sure the challenge for you is doing that whilst at the same time making sure the person is safe, because isn't there a thing when you're doing a route, especially in the early days, knowing that person's right beside you, that, hey, if I get lost, my O&M or something happens, this person's walking right beside me. Suddenly we don't have that.
And that can be a huge part of planning your lesson in and of itself. You may do a few lessons on just confidence building before you even get to any skills. So that's a big factor in all of this that we have to consider is, like you were talking about, safety, because that is always number one. We're all dying to get back out and working, but safety has to come first. And when we do get back out and working, how, like you said, how do we continue to keep those safety measures in place? But also then B, how do we look at building that confidence again before we throw somebody in the deep end, so to speak, with us being so far away.
Yeah. Okay. Victoria, I might come to you because it's sort of linked, because we've been chatting a lot about, you're going to be going to Trinity College, moving to the city, moving to Dublin, wanting to go out and about like any other student. How are you going to, because this is obviously, I guess, on your mind in terms of how this might impact you?
Yeah, I think, obviously for most of us, it's uncharted territory. We don't know how it's going to work. But with, moving to somewhere new, there's challenges anyway. And with this social distancing, it's going to be extra challenges, but I'm sure it can be achieved in some way. Even with listening to Laura and the Ramble tag, that may be something we can look at using in future, for just getting around the college in the first while, because even, there will be social distancing in lectures, and I've been told that they're not sure if student accommodation will be available because of that. So I think we're all trying to find solutions and different ways we can get around.
Okay. Let's try to get back to Asosa if we can. Asosa, can you hear us? I think we may have an issue with Asosa's audio, and it could be at his end.
Just while we're waiting for that, Stuart, just to touch on the assistive technology part that was mentioned earlier, that was a very interesting point as well, because so the organization that I used to work for, we ran a lot of social groups outside, out and about, so that's going to be another way of working when we go back. But also in terms of how you train a person to use assistive technology. So we had to start doing virtual sessions over Zoom, which has worked quite well, but it's just that you don't have that hands-on approach anymore, and the people that are used to that, it's going to be a whole new way of working for them too.
Right, and of course for people with sight loss, hands-on and that physical contact is so important sometimes, you know.
It really is,
touch
yeah.
something. And on that note, maybe just on a related note, I might bring Kevin in here, because Kevin, I know service providers have taken a big hit with this gig, trying to run and maintain services, putting stuff online, and you know, funding cuts. This is a challenge, I'm sure.
Certainly, Stuart, it's very challenging for service providers. Predominantly, a lot of service providers are charities and depend on the public's generosity, and there's lots of good causes out there at the moment. So delivering services is going to be challenging. In the NCBI, we've pivoted and are delivering, like what Daniel said, a lot of our services online and remotely, and that is going well. It's very challenging because what's very apparent to me, unfortunately, people who are blind and vision impaired don't always have the access to the technology that they need to access this digital online world. We were all moving in that direction, but COVID-19 has brought that forward and has accelerated it. So we need to be very conscious that we don't leave anyone behind. And just going back to an earlier point around sighted guide, that's a real issue, particularly for people who are in the early days of their sight loss journey. They can be very dependent on sighted guide, and we've heard from service users who haven't left the house because they can't avail of a sighted guide. And in Ireland, we've submitted proposals and have had some limited conversations with public health officials around whether a sighted guide is acceptable, because there are some medical professionals who would say that the chance of passing it on is quite minimal, and you have to do a risk assessment. But it's very important for NCBI, before we would advise people to engage in sighted guide, that the officials in Ireland who are responsible for the COVID-19 give us the blessing. And I suppose one of the things that's really their concern is, at the moment, if you think of the public health guidance, one of the elements is that you should sneeze into your elbow, and that's the very part of the body where a blind or vision impaired person would grab onto to avail of a sighted guide. So it really is a very complex area, but I think a solution does need to be found very quickly, because if not, it's going to lead to other mental health and other comorbidities.
Sure. Yeah. I'm gonna stay with the Irish scene for just a minute, and then I want to go back to Matthew and talk about work.
Stuart,
yeah.
Just to let
Sorry,
you know, Asosa's not actually on the chat box anymore. He's vanished.
Okay, we'll try and get Asosa back while I'm doing that. Jackie, you were telling me you went, did you say after 9 or 10 weeks you went into the shop this morning for the first time? I think the audience would love to know, what was that experience like?
The anxiety last night was, I was completely up the high dope. I couldn't do it on my own, and I still don't think I could do it on my own. The guard who has been free running RUM said he had come in with me. It was, he was describing to me, say, where the people would queue up outside Tesco, and that's the way that me and RUM would walk in. The door that we'd normally go in is now the exit. So the entrance door is kind of like a fire door or something that's beside it that has to be manually opened. He showed me where the sanitizing station was, but again, I couldn't find that on my own. Normally, where I would go into Tesco to get assistance, that's gone, and it was a very weird, very strange, weird experience. Lovely to be back in town. Lovely for RUM to be doing her work like she normally does, but I wouldn't do it tomorrow morning, put it that way. Because of just the concern of it's busy enough with people. There was roads were being dug up, and I didn't feel that secure. To do it on my own, I would have to have somebody with me, and I'm not a member of the guards, because like if I did need help, technically they can touch you to arrest you. So
Yeah.
I felt I could grab for him, or he could have grabbed for me if I was going to, you know, fall or something. But that if I got stuck, if I had a panic attack, I could have grabbed for his arm and done okay, because of him being a guard, and social distancing does apply, but doesn't apply in the same sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, one of the things I was thinking of was that for the small local shops, like there's a shop here at the end of our road, and I know the guys in there quite well. I don't think a whole lot's going to change, but it's those bigger shops, isn't it? And going into those big supermarket chains and knowing what's the procedure now, and how do you do it safely. Matthew, I'm very keen, because a lot of conversations I've been having with people in the last couple of days has been around the workplace. What's the workplace going to look like post COVID-19? Social distancing will make workplaces very different. And for those of us with sight loss, I suppose, touching, exploring, being able to navigate safely is key. What do you, because you work in a big space in Glasgow, how are you feeling about a return to work, and have you had any conversations around that with your work?
Yes, so I'm aware and grateful here that my employer has always been very good with disability, with reasonable adjustments, with understanding, and that creates the sort of space we need to start from to have that sort of conversation. Now, Zurich, whom I work for, have luckily adapted very well to working from home. Luckily for me as well, I am allowed to fit within what they have identified as a first phase of return to office, which has been identified for essential business reasons and for any member of staff who could be deemed vulnerable for any reason, who would also benefit materially from a return to the office. So for me, that benefit concerns my reasonable adjustments, because in the office I have a height adjustable desk, a much better chair, 2 large monitors on monitor arms, the space to have my braille display where I need it behind my keyboard for note taking while I'm talking to customers or writing notes on things. It is impossible to replicate those reasonable adjustments at home. Discarding Department for Work and Pensions access to work aside, my employer has said, if you want anything more for your adjustments at home, we will pay for it. You just have to tell us, which is brilliant. But I did have to say, I can't take you up on that because I don't have the space, the luxury of the space to have to replicate that sort of setup. For me, when I can go back to the office, that's when I can go and hopefully get my independent life back. I'm also lucky that living in the city, if I had to, I could walk to work. Otherwise, it would take longer than the train, but I could do it. Equally, I can take the train if there's enough space. My mobility is good enough that I feel confident to do that. I have a limited amount of sight, although I'm still registered blind with Labour's congenital amaurosis, that I can see enough to maintain some social distance from people, but it's going to take a lot of care and attention to get right. So for me, returning to work is going to be putting all of these pieces back together, and I think I'm confident to do that. But what I realize is I have the benefit of the career experience, of the mobility experience, of the positive experience interacting with people in society to do that. And for anyone who doesn't have the benefit of that much experience in work, in mobility training, and in social confidence, especially if you have more anxiety, doing any of that is going to be harder. So I'm equally very aware that in the shorter and longer term future, we're going to have to ask ourselves as a community and a society very hard whether we have enough provisions to give people the opportunity they need in these areas.
It also sounds as though that maybe having good communication is the key. So you've been chatting to your work, they've been very supportive, and you've kept that open, you know, so they're willing to do whatever they need for you, which is key as well.
Yes.
I'm going to I want to go to Laura and Tom again in a sec, but before I do that, I want to jump over to Glenn and Carl, because I'm conscious that there's probably lots going on in the chat that I'm not aware of, and hands being raised. And guys, how are we doing over there?
Yeah, there are many questions coming in. There's a couple of people that might be worth bringing in at some point. Dave Wilson and Lizzie have both got ideas on a new social distancing, which you may want to talk about. The three big areas that are coming up are how you're going to manage distancing inside shops, how you're going to manage distancing on public transport, and how you're going to, particularly with the younger children with visual impairment, how they're going to get on at school. So I don't know how you want to feed those in, Stuart. So there's three areas: shopping, transport, schools, that might be worthy of discussing on the panel. And Dave and Lizzie may have some useful things to input if you want to bring them in at some point.
Definitely going off the shopping one. I have seen very positive experiences so far with that. In terms of my local Tesco store near me, I went in a couple of weeks, and obviously they have at the moment they have the lines, don't they, where you expected to stand outside in the line, exercise social distance, and they only allow a certain number of people in at a time. And it's one of the massive big Tesco extras, and it was really heartening to see that when I went there with a white cane, they sort of said, you know, in the future, if you come to this store, don't wait in this line. If you want to come to the front, come to the front. We will give you assistance. We will assist you around the store. Just come to customer services and we'll help you. And that was really nice. Like, you know, to hear that, and rather than, oh, we can't guide you because of social distancing. I didn't get that at all, which was really nice. How long that will go on for, I don't know.
I actually know that's really interesting to hear you say that, Daniel, because I think one thing COVID-19 has kind of done as a society is maybe made us all think a little bit more about other people around us and how we can offer help, and maybe that's translating into your shopping trip as well. I just want to bring in Kevin for a sec on this, just around the issue of transport and how providers might engage. And Kevin, I don't know if the National Council of the Blind has had any engagement from transport providers or from our transport areas over here in terms of how that might shape up for people with sight loss.
Yes, certainly, Stuart, as we move through the reopening phases, there is going to be significant pressure on public transport, and they're going to be operating at reduced capacity, and I'm sure that will be similar in the UK. And to paint that in a very stark terms, Dublin Bus, which is our city bus, double-decker buses are operating with a maximum capacity of 17 passengers at present, and at peak rush hour there could be touching 100 people on those buses. So that's quite a drastic reduction, almost 80%. So we've asked transport operators at a minimum to ensure that the disability seat remains vacant for people with disabilities, to ensure that people who are dependent on public transport totally to get from A to B are prioritised in some way, and we're waiting to hear back on whether that will be possible. We're also asking them around making sure that drivers and staff provide direction verbally and assistance, because some of the seats on the buses, again going back to what I was saying at the outset, are blocked off using visual signs, but if you're blind and vision impaired you can't see those. So it's going to require a level of communication, and as we all know, as people who are blind and vision impaired, some of our transport staff are better at providing support than others, so we are going to be very dependent on them. And again, some people are very concerned about hygiene and how often the buses are going to be cleaned, because if you're a blind and vision impaired person, as you travel down through the bus or tram, you're going to touch more of the surfaces.
Absolutely. And I think that's a big fear. And also knowing, is there somebody in a seat? You know, I'm on a busy train and I happen to put my hand on someone's shoulder because I need to check, is the seat occupied or not? So all these things, I think, challenging us. Taylor, just, I guess, from your perspective as an instructor, the issue of, I suppose, younger children in particular who may need specific assistance, has that come up on your radar with your teams in terms of what you're thinking might be good in terms of how to support?
Not on my radar.
Okay.
I work with our adult service users, but I know all of our teams are focused on what their population is affected with most. So I know our rehabilitation specialists, who are our staff who work with children, are hard at work at figuring all of that out. But Stuart, if I can, a few things have been said that kind of focus around this idea of communication. And with public transportation, with getting back to when services resume, working with your rehab professionals, even parents of children with visual impairments, I think we keep touching on this idea of communication. And I think now more than ever that is so important, whether it's, telling your instructor or your child's instructor how you are most comfortable being taught in these times, or what tools you're comfortable using. When it comes to shops and public transportation, getting on the phone with the store and saying, hi, can you tell me if there's been any changes in the last week, or can you describe to me what the front of your shop looks like, or calling the bus company and saying, can you tell me what provisions have been put in place? What do I have to be aware of before I get to the bus stop? I think communication now, I don't think it was used as well as it should have been before all of this, but I think now it's even more important. Yeah,
and I suppose being able to say what you need and letting people know in advance, I suppose, as well.
Absolutely.
If possible. Okay, we will go to, there's one or two audience members who have something to say. We will go to that in a sec, but I do want to ask Laura and or Tom to talk about Ramble Tag for a sec, because I'm very conscious that we've mentioned Ramble Tag a few times. We haven't really explained, Laura, how it came about. You guys have a great story. And also how, and I really believe, how this could be an aid to help in this situation. So do you want to tell us a little bit, Laura, about what Ramble Tag is?
Yeah, hi again. Yeah, there's so many amazing points being brought up, and you kind of want to address loads. But yeah, so from the beginning, me, Tom, neighbours, I helped him walk his dog a couple of times, and during one of these walks together, we found that traditional methods weren't working for us, and we were bumping into each other or losing contact, or we just didn't really feel the need to be so close when we're out strolling. It felt like an unnecessary restriction on us as we moved. So one day we just kind of back and forward came up with the idea, and that night I chopped up a couple of things, bags that I didn't use, and a knee pad, and I put together a kind of armband with a handle, and went to Tom the next day, said, right, let's go out another walk, and we did, and we just immediately felt like the difference in how we moved, it was so much easier, and we started to discuss how, it might address things like gender issues. Maybe people are a wee bit shy with a new guide or whatever. Not everybody's completely comfortable with the physical contact, and just the actual physical comfort that came with it, where you could walk out of sync a little bit but still remain connected easily. So we started sort of focusing on, looking at helping people on a daily basis, but we straight away got a phone call from Glasgow Airport, and they just loved the whole idea of it and how it was just an added option for people travelling. They knew that people weren't a fan of being offered a wheelchair if they were mobile. And that was pretty much the only option that they were given. and so they wanted to just offer something different for people to use, and they found that the majority of people that wanted to use it really loved it. Some people still opted for the wheelchair and things, and that's fine. So yeah, we went on to just kind of open it up to assistance. We've between the two of us, we're just like, we try and approach as many people as we can, charities, assistance in like stadiums, airports, rail stations and things like that. So I guess with the COVID, it has shone a little bit of light on it, that we hadn't really expected, because we never wanted to claim anything about it, you know, protecting you on a level that you wouldn't catch it if you used one or anything. So we've been sensitive to how we've approached promoting it during this time, but we are getting contacted by people. But I'll maybe pass it to Tom, because he's been the one that's dealing with everything on the phone and stuff.
Yeah, and I would just say, just before you pass over to Tom, I used it. I used it a couple of times in Glasgow Airport. Great, a great experience, because you're definitely further away from your guide while still maintaining that key physical contact, I think, which is part of the thing. So, Laura, just maybe very briefly, have you thought about even extending that contact a little more so that it might comply with some of the guidelines around social distancing, or is that in your minds at the moment?
I think we feel that if you were to attach something to, I just seen a wee post there saying somebody still wasn't completely sure what it was, so I'll just explain again, just briefly. It's a little mini harness that wraps around the arm of the guide, and rather than holding on to skin, elbow or clothing, it just offers a little extended handle that comes out enough that you can hook your fingers in or your hand, just like similar to the feeling of a dog lead, you know, a sort of not neoprene, but something similar, a space mesh fabric, which is like weatherproof and easy to clean and everything. So it's just a little handle that would be on the arm, and we have, you know, a few variations of that, but we feel, I think, that if you could wrap anything around the existing handle, we could create something for that to create distance. But then you've got the thing of somebody, you're not getting much signals from your guide if you're on a loose length of rope or whatever it would be.
I was explaining it to somebody yesterday, Laura. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, from a sighted person's perspective, it's like putting on a blood pressure cuff. And you know, you clip it on, and then the person holds the other end of it, as the little, as you say, you know.
It's much comfier than a blood pressure thing, we must add. Okay,
Asosa is going to be logging on in just a second. So thanks for that. And we will come back to Tom in a minute, because we want to talk more about Ramble Tag and some of the things you guys have been doing. But so I'm just conscious that there are one or two people from the audience who may want to come in. Glenn, you mentioned David, I think.
Yeah, Dave Wilson and Lizzie. I can't pick up Dave at the moment on the attendees, so perhaps if we go to,
and I know Lizzie emailed me. Lizzie is potentially writing a piece around.
Yeah, so I'll bring Lizzie in.
So Lizzie, just bear with us a sec. We will allow you. There's an option that will allow.
I think Lizzie should better speak now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi Lizzie,
yes.
We can hear you.
Hi Lizzie.
Okay, fantastic. Hi, my name's Lizzie. I'm a freelance journalist, and I've also recently started volunteering at Pocklington Lodge, which is a sort of residence area for people who are living with sight impairment, which is very close to me in West London. I'm interested in pitching, well, I have pitched a story already to The Observer about some of the challenges that people are finding with social distancing, but more to that, some of the solutions and innovations that are potentially in place. So it's been really interesting to hear some of these. I will be following up with RNIB and any other organisations as well, to kind of find out what's being trialled, where it's being trialled, and also what might be accessible on a national scale. I don't know if they'll definitely take the story. It depends whether they've got space for it, but they have indicated that they're interested in it. The other thing I should add is that at Pocklington Lodge, what we have been doing is trialing a new form of social distancing to get people out and about and into back into the park, back to the shop and so on. What we found is that if you use a cane, so obviously if you've got sight impairment, you're probably using a cane anyway to go out. But if you use two canes, the guide can actually hold one end of the cane, meaning they are 2 meters away or 1.5 meters away, which is probably enough space. And the other person can use their cane with their right hand. I think it's the right hand. Yes, it is the right hand. And they use their cane to kind of do the sides so they can, you know, navigate the sides. And the guide in front is holding on to the other end of the stick. They're holding on to that part of the stick with their left hand. And then the guide is kind of able to then tell them, you know, there's paving slabs here, there's this, there's that, there's the other. The other thing we found with this technique is because it looks a little bit unusual, people are actually social distancing more from you. They're actually giving us a wider berth. It does take a little bit longer, so it's not the swiftest process in the world. But if you've got a bit of extra time, we found we've got no problems going into the shops. We're getting priority going into shops. And it's really good for kind of casual strolls. I don't think it would work as well on public transport because obviously what if the door's closed on the cane that you're using to distance? I don't think that would work very effectively. But yeah, I don't know if anyone else is also trialing these kind of things. It'd be great to find out if that is happening more widely.
Okay, Lizzie, thanks for that. Really interesting concept, definitely. I'm just I'm picturing it in my head. I'm just going to throw this one open. Any of our panelists have any thoughts on anything, or indeed, have any of you tried anything with your family or friends, or have you needed to go out and you've kind of said, I really need to do something to help in this regard?
Stuart, Kevin here from the NCBI. So Vision Sports Ireland is a charity which recently merged with the NCBI in Ireland, and over the weekend we trialled in conjunction with a park run using a cane so that people could get out and go for their weekly run, and a small number of people participated, and we're currently just processing the feedback we got from those people to see whether we can ramp it up and whether it's a viable solution. From my own experience, I found it very useful. So the idea would be that you have your cane, and then either person holds either end, and you have a little cuff to tie it onto your hand. And because it's rigid, it allows you to keep the 2 meters distance. And I found it really helpful and beneficial, and it was great to get out running in the outdoors again.
Excellent. And it's interesting with just some sort of, with some creative thinking, people are coming up with all sorts of interesting solutions. Daniel, I'm going to go to you for a second. I want to go back to this work thing again. Your work situation will involve you doing a lot of moving around to a couple of sites, interacting with a lot of people. Have you thought about how that's gonna work?
Well, it's gonna be really interesting because especially you're dealing with so for my role, it's a lot of emotional support. So people have just lost their sight and they've got to the point where they need someone to talk to. So you're dealing with a lot of emotional situations. You're dealing with people who are upset, and if from my perspective, if someone was sat over the other side of the room when they were talking to me, I would feel less like I was being supported, if that makes any sense. You're more distant, and it just would feel a little bit weird, to be honest. It will be the new normal, but it's just adapting to that new normal. And again, there's the thing of, will we have to wear masks in a hospital? Because again, that will then distort, somebody's speech, whether you're talking to them or they're talking to you. So there's also that to consider. Not even that then, if we look at their hearing loss, so you get people who are blind but maybe have a bit of hearing loss as well, so then there's that distance aspect. Are they going to be able to hear you? There's so much to consider, and that's obviously why we're not back in the hospital yet, because there's all of these things that need to be considered.
Huge things to consider. And of course, all these things take time. And some of the things you have to try out, haven't you? Because you're not sure that something is going to work. Okay, I will go back to the Ramble Tag guys in a minute, because I know Tom has some info to share with us. Before we do that, let's check in with Glenn and Carl, our chatty guys. How's it going over there, Glenn?
He's muted.
Glenn's muted. How's it going, Carl?
There's lots and lots and lots of questions coming in. I've just managed.
Guys, I'd like to bring Dave Wilson in, if possible, just to round off that other social distancing ideas. Dave, you should be unmuted. Okay. Can you pop in onto the call?
Absolutely, thank you. I hope
Hi, Dave.
Hiya, Stuart. Thanks very much. Just to introduce myself, my name is Dave Wilson. I'm the resource officer for the Manx Blind Welfare Society based in the Isle of Man. Now, we've had some slightly different challenges. Now, we're an independent Crown dependency, so we're self-governing, and we've actually had our borders closed since the 23rd of March, so nobody in, nobody out, and we've been doing things probably slightly differently to the rest of the UK. What we've found, we've been approached by quite a few of our members. We have around about 500 on our books at the moment, expressing some of the similar concerns that have been mentioned today in the chat and by the other people as part of the conversation. So we've been looking at how we can assist our members, and one of the ways that they've suggested we might be able to help is in how that they can be identified more easily. Now, we know there are questions and debates on both sides of the fence about identifying somebody as being visually impaired and not identifying them. So that aside slightly, because we are in different times at the moment, what we've done with discussion with our membership is we've produced, as an interim measure, and we may need to adjust and make changes to this, we've introduced a couple of ways that our members can be identified. Now, this is a choice. It's not something that we're saying people have to do, but if they do have concerns as far as social distancing is concerned, and we probably all should, then we have two ways that might be able to assist those members to be identified. One of them is we've produced a credit card size badge, which has a very straightforward, simple, plain message on there, which says, I'm visually impaired, I can't socially distance. We've also produced a high-vis tabard with the same message on that as well. So we're offering that to our members at the moment if they want to use those to be more easily identified. Now, we're very lucky on the island here that we've got a very supportive population, and people are helping in many ways and any way that they can. But we all know the issues around identifying somebody with a visual impairment sometimes. So this is just something we're trialing at the moment. We've only just introduced it this week. We do need to back it up with a public media campaign, because it's no good having these things if nobody understands what they're there for. So this is something we're trying. We've got one or two of our members who've taken this up already, and it's just an experiment to see what we can do. But hopefully this will mean that it will be more obvious to the members of the public that somebody has got a sight impairment, and it will be more difficult for them to socially distance.
Excellent. So going into shops and that, showing a card like that. Sorry, somebody wants to come in there.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we're following the same lines at Guide Dogs. You know, we're really asking people to always, even if they're going out with a family member and being guided, to always bring a form of cane with them, to, you know, along the similar lines, really just make others aware that it's their responsibility to socially distance because of this visual impairment. And if you're somebody who doesn't normally go out with a cane, getting a symbol cane from RNIB, something to just identify right now in these times.
Yep.
Or like Dave said, we don't call them high vises back home in America, so sometimes I lose the UK word for them. The making sure you've got something high vis on, but yeah, along the same lines.
Okay, let's. I want to just go to Jackie for a sec, because Jackie was out in the shops this morning. Jackie, would something like that be of use to you? Did you have a card or something high vis to say, hey guys, I can't socially distance?
I would feel quite uncomfortable. Like, I have a dog, so I would hope that Rum at my side would indicate, you know, in the past she hasn't indicated that I'm visually impaired, but that having her would say that it would make me feel a bit more vulnerable. I think if I had something on me to say that I was visually impaired, and plus on the dog's harness, at times I have "do not pet me, I'm working," and people are coming up to read the sign. So I don't know if that would happen, but I personally would feel a bit uncomfortable. But again, it's just not something that I don't know. I would need to try it, but I would feel uncomfortable at this moment in time if I was asked to put something on.
I think, like you were saying, the fact of having a guide dog next to you can be indication enough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, Kevin. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and just building on Jackie's point and David's point, for a lot of people, having a sign or a label attached would make them feel really uncomfortable. So at the moment, NCBI is strongly recommending for anyone in the Republic of Ireland to carry the cane or the symbol cane. And I suppose we're hearing a lot about people being socially responsible. So blind and vision impaired people have a role as well to be socially responsible, because it's very difficult for a member of the public to identify yourself if you're not carrying a cane, a symbol cane, or a guide dog. So it's really important that I know people mightn't like having to carry it, but at this time, just to step up to the plate and actually bring it out with you. It won't be forever, but I do think it will really help with public awareness.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, that we need to do our bit as well to make sure that people understand that we're here. Victoria, you're going to be going to college. You're going to be having nights out like all students, going all over the place. Do you think something like this would help you in the mass of the crowds that you're going to find yourself in?
I definitely think it would be something I'm willing to try, especially at the start, you know, where you're meeting new people and you're just college, you know, is usually very busy. So I think even getting back to a setting of college and schools and socially distancing then. So if I have something that, you know, if I have a cane or something, just the people know that I, you know, can't see them, so they will, you know, kind of do stay a bit away. And I think, like you all were saying, we all have our part to play, and I know that, you know, we may not want to have labels attached to us, which makes sense, but this is a temporary solution, you know. Yeah. So I definitely think it'd be worth it to try.
I'm one of these people that I'm very I don't like to advertise that I have a visual impairment, and one of the certain aspects of that, I guess, is the whole I guess you've all probably come across them when you get the buggies in train stations, and I just hope that doesn't become the new thing, because that would really annoy me a lot, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Tom, button.
Right, I've always wanted to drive them, by the way, Daniel. But anyway, let's go back to Tom, and then we're going to talk to Glenn and Carl again, who are monitoring the chat. Tom, tell us about what's happening at Rambletaig. I know there's things going on.
Yeah, well, we're very happy to say that Network Rail have asked for a large quantity of Rambletags, and they will be available for use at railway stations in England. So one would assume that these key workers, and the assistance crew, would be free of any COVID symptoms. So if you are visually impaired, you can go along to the railway station, slap some sanitizer on your hand, grab the Rambletaig, and he'll take you where you want to go. And hopefully that a lot you'd mentioned about seating and so on, but hopefully the assistance crew would get you to a situation in a carriage in the train where that social distancing would be all sorted out, and hopefully at the other end you would be met with someone from the crew with a ramble tag as well.
Oh,
Well,
that's
ramble
really
tags,
good. Yeah.
ramble tags everywhere basically is the thing. We're going to see them all over the rail network in the UK, and hopefully over here in Ireland as well, Tom.
I hope so. I
And
hope
get
so.
them over this side of.
You know, I totally agree with, you know, there's nothing worse than being taken in that big buggy thing that goes.
It's got a bright orange light and it beeps at you, and it's like, oh my God,
Let's
it's horrible.
blow a couple up.
Okay, so people don't like the buggies. Okay, we all want to drive them though. I think we've established that. Right. Sorry, Taylor, off you go.
That was me there.
Or
so
Laura, sorry.
well, just someone's asking if they can be cleaned easily there, you know, between uses. They are far easier to clean than if you were holding an arm. They could be sprayed down easily. They're resilient, so they could be sprayed with, but after every use, or you know, I don't know whether they would offer gloves or not, but I guess they would be spraying them after use.
Anyway, I was at the cooperative.
Okay. I think somebody's mic is on there.
Tom, you're still talking.
I know. I've got the doctor on the phone.
Oh.
Go away.
Oh, can you mute Tom?
I think we can probably mute. Carl can possibly mute. Okay. I'm gonna go back for a moment in case there's anything major coming in on chat that we want to address with Carl and Glenn. Anything you guys want to flag, Glenn?
Yeah, have you got me? Am I on mute? I'm muted.
We got you.
So a couple of things I wanted to say. Just there's lots and lots and lots of questions coming in, and my plan is that we will work our way through these and answer specific ones and guide people to places where they need to. Although I can see the panels are picking up ones that they see are relevant to them, but actually there's also a number of key areas that I think we can bring out of this, where we can perhaps do a more specific session as a follow-up in perhaps a week or two's time to pull out some very specific answers. Maybe if we can talk to some of the transport authorities or some of the schools, get some very specific answers, because there's a lot of experience coming out here, lots of questions being asked that I don't think we specifically know the answers to about how some of these things are going to work.
Might be an idea to get some of the manager, you know, the people that manage the assistance desk, you know, like LNER and Virgin and whoever else, you know what I mean, get them to come on and say their different approaches, because everyone is going to have their own different approach to doing this.
Yeah, that's my thinking. We're going to try and follow this up with perhaps some of the agencies coming on and saying how they're actually going to manage it. So those are some thoughts that come to my mind looking at all the questions coming in.
There are two quick thoughts I have on transport, if I may. Just very quickly, I'm aware that this sounds brilliant, but hopefully the key intercity rail stations operated by Network Rail are soon going to be using Ramble Tag. I'm concerned about how well assistance might work for shorter, more regional, more local trains. And if I'm not mistaken, something that I think is probably good for us to be aware of here and to be good advocates of ourselves and our needs. I'm quite sure that in the UK there is a requirement that where a rail operator cannot fulfil its requirement to make a journey accessible from end to end to a disabled passenger who has booked assistance, then I believe they are required to provide onward taxi travel to make up the journey from or to the last or the beginning travel point. So I'm not sure if that's something that, if the system does fall short, is good to be aware of to possibly utilise.
TfL are adapting that at the moment, aren't they? I believe TfL have actually done that at the moment, obviously with them being short-staffed. I think that if people do go to stations where they maybe don't have the staff, they are transporting them, I believe.
So that's one really good thing. And from travel abroad, now I'm aware of, from personal experience, this being the case in the Netherlands, in Greece, and on the Dubai metro, and it may well be in Ireland, in other European countries. A lot of countries in their transport hubs have tactile lines to show key routes through the station. So from the entrance to the ticket desk, to the platforms, to the doors of the trains that have got the accessible seating inside them. And all we're getting at the moment are these high-vis tape put down on the floor, which is fine for people who can see. But countries abroad, they're already putting down more permanent lines, well, they have been for years, that are tactile and visual. And it does just make me wonder that there is already a solution out there that many countries and transport authorities are using that makes their systems more accessible, and that's something we should perhaps be challenging ourselves to do better. It's even possible to make temporary tactile lines by putting string underneath the sellotape. I know that's how some temporary goalball courts are made up in sport.
Yeah, and there's definitely a space, as Glenn says, to, you know, and we've been talking about this already, by the way, to run this session, but to target it a little more and to talk to transport providers and talk to some other organisations to see how they can best support us as we come into this this new normal. So I just wanted to quickly, because I know there's lots of stuff on chat, if there's anything else that we want to pick out from chat, or anybody who wants to make a contribution, Glenn or Carl.
We've got a couple of hands up still, so I don't know if you want to go to people with hands up.
Let's just take 2 or 3 if we can. I'm Sosa is trying to come back in because I really do want to have a quick conversation around the medical bit, so I'm just working on that as well. But let's see, can we get 1 or 2 hands from people who may have, someone maybe who's had their hand up for a while. And as we said this today at the start, if you do have a contribution, if you can just be mindful to keep it brief, because we have a lot of people here today and a lot of panelists as well who want to speak.
So Fiona's had a hand up for a long while, so you should be able to talk now, Fiona, if you've got an input to make.
And Sosa is back with us, just to say.
Yeah, Fiona is should be there.
Hello, is that me?
That's
Hi,
you, Fiona. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
Hi. First of all, I want to say how wonderful it is that we're having this discussion. I actually wrote to In Touch last week, and that started a radio discussion of this matter. I'm lucky. I know I'm lucky because I have a husband and therefore have a sighted person to help me with a lot of things. But I also have a life beyond my husband, and I have met with 2 very different attitudes. One is from my friends who say, well, let people argue and say, why aren't you keeping social distance? And other people who are saying, no, I don't think I can go out with you because we won't be keeping social distances. And so it's not just me and what I do, it's what my carer or my friend or guide does, who isn't a public person like a rail assistant or something like that. It's more a case of they often feel extremely unhappy and are getting the glares from people, which I can happily ignore. So is there a possibility of not just the blind person having something like a little thing, but saying, this is my approved carer or something like that for the assistant to wear? And my other question is this idea of only one person into a shop at a time. My husband and I go to places together and they'll say, we can't let you in, you're 2 people. Now the fact is I'm not going to go wandering off by myself doing something. So why can't we be counted as a single person? Is there a possibility of raising this? Lizzie, who I think, good luck with doing your article for the newspaper. This is one of the things that we need to think about, that I go to the Sainsbury's once a week on the vulnerable hour, and they know us and they say, that's fine, you go in together. But I've been to other shops that have said, no, sorry, you're 2 people, we can't have you in.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just gonna, in relation to your first point, because I think it's really interesting, I'm gonna go to Kevin for a sec, because Kevin, from an organisation perspective, and I appreciate this is Ireland, but similar, I suppose, aspects, have people talked to you in NCBI about, hey, I'm out with a carer or with maybe a family member and this is challenging for them as well?
Yeah, we've certainly had people approach us on our national helpline to say that they've been out with a carer or a family member or a close friend, and people have passed negative commentary. And where possible, as much as any charity can do, we're very conscious about trying to educate the public that some people are very much dependent upon sighted guide or that support to get from A to B. And it was interesting what the contributor mentioned there in relation to shops and pharmacies about only allowing one customer in at a time, because very early in the whole COVID 2019, a very large pharmacy chain, we had received a number of complaints about them and that particular policy. And in fairness, when I got in contact with the director of pharmacy and pointed it out to them, it was quickly changed. But it just showed me that a lot of these measures were put in place without a lot of care and consideration, and they definitely weren't disability proof. So I think as businesses are becoming used to the new restrictions, thankfully the number of these negative experiences beginning to drop, but there's always an onus to keep awareness on it. And I think it's very important for blind and vision impaired people when they encounter a negative experience, where possible, and if they are feeling up to it, to try to educate the staff as to why they're doing it and they're not breaking law, because that hopefully will help other people not to have a similar negative experience.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Now, Sosa is back with us, and I really want to, and I know there are some hands raised, we will go back to the hands in a minute, but I really want to go to the medical aspects of this for a minute, because I suppose, why do we need to keep 2 meters away? What's the 2 meter versus 1 meter argument at the moment that's going around? We're hearing a lot about this at the moment. And Sosa, could you talk maybe a little bit around why the need for us to have this 2 meter space in relation to the medical background, and I suppose how dangerous the virus is and how quickly it can spread?
Okay, thank you, Stuart. Now, the reason for the concept behind social distancing is simply this: the virus is not actually a living thing. It's a protein molecule with a bit of RNA or DNA, and that it has no legs. It can't move from place to place, so it actually needs people to transport it to where it's going to infect the next person.
So because we're in this kind of 2 meters, is 2 meters the max, or do you think 1 meter? Because there's been a lot of talk about maybe lessening this down to 1 meter.
Yes, lessening the distance required. Now, the issue is, this comes down to mostly theoretical physics. What they've done is they've realized that the virus is spread in droplets shed by people when they're talking or sneezing or coughing. And they looked at the physics of it, and they've realized that when these droplets are emitted, the furthest they usually will travel is about 2 meters before they settle to the ground under the influence of gravity. Therefore, if you're more than 2 meters away from somebody, there's no way the virus can reach you to infect you. Now, this was all done theoretically, but looking at it in practical terms, even where people were less than this distance apart, they didn't actually seem to get it. So even though in theory, anybody within a 2 meter range could get infected, what it looks like from observation is that even if you're only a meter away, the virus doesn't seem to reach people, or at least the risk of you being infected is so low as not to make any difference.
Okay, and I suppose just my other question would be in relation to, because for blind people, people with sight loss, being able to touch things is so important. And I know the virus lives for certain times on certain different surfaces. Do you advise people to kind of carry wipes, you know, when they're out and about?
Yes, I would advise you to carry wipes, or get a small container of hand sanitizer that you can carry in your pocket. So once you've touched any surface, what I usually do is, if I go to the shops with my wife, I tend to touch things to try and identify them or pick them up and look at them more closely. So once I've paid and I'm leaving the shop, before I pick up my bags, I sanitize my hands.
Okay, so that's brilliant. Thank you very much. It's just interesting to get this this kind of perspective on it, I suppose. Right, let's go back for a sec to Glenn and Carl. Yeah.
Have you got something else playing at the minute? Because we've got you in stereo. There's a really bad delay. Well, I can hear you twice. That's very echoey.
I could hear myself as well from somebody
That's
else.
fine now. I don't know
Yeah.
what you've done, but it's perfect. Glenn, have you unmuted? Have you allowed? Who else has got the hand up? Who was next?
So we had Fiona.
Yeah, we have 12 hands up at the moment, so you can, Carl, you can pick up anyone that you want to.
I think we've got a couple at the top, haven't we? Was John Donahue one as well, I think, or was it his hand's gone down? I'll tell you what, we'll go to Samantha Ash.
Okay. So Samantha, you can unmute yourself in a sec.
You should be able to unmute yourself now, Samantha.
Oh yeah, there we go. It works now.
Yeah.
I think that the whole identifying that you're visually impaired and disabled is a good thing, because people will get to know if you're disabled and how they can potentially help you. Whereas if you don't identify that you have a disability, no one's going to know what it is that you have and how to help you. So I think, and I've actually, I'm actually the first person on the island to try out one of these cards that Dave has made, and I actually have one. I haven't gone out yet, but tomorrow I may do. So it will be interesting to see how the public reacts to it. But regarding that ramble tag harness, it sounds really cool. I think maybe the Isle of Man should get some.
Yeah.
There you go. Laura will, I'm sure, happily oblige. Samantha, so just can I ask you, Samantha, do you feel a little more in your own head now, a bit more confident going out because you have this card? Because it strikes me as a really interesting idea as well.
Yeah, I do. But I mean, I'm obviously scared of going out because of the virus, because I have other conditions. But you know, the way to look at it is we have to go out eventually, and we've got to adapt to this new normal. And so we just have to adapt. And if having a card that says, look, we can't see you, we can't socially distance, if that helps people to understand, well, actually, they can't see us, maybe we'd better keep our distance, you know, it will work. I mean, my friend Chris Brady, who's in this Zoom chat somewhere, you might want to speak to him because he's from an elderly generation. No offense, Chris. And he travels a lot with some residual vision.
Okay. Well, certainly. Thanks a million, Samantha, for your comments. I want to just go back for a sec to Jackie, because guide dogs is always an interesting thing, traveling with a guide dog. And a lot of things I've been seeing on Facebook lately, and Jackie, I think you put it on your post, which was the one that kind of got me interested in having you on the panel, was, hey, you know, my guide dog doesn't know that I have to keep, you know, these 2 meters away, and guide dogs, you know, react in a certain way. So there, you were sort of encouraging members of the public to just be aware of that as well, weren't you, around dogs? And I know you've mentioned already people coming up to actually stroke the dog, even though the sign on the harness says, please don't stroke me. They come up to read the sign. Are these things you're concerned about?
I'm quite concerned. I'm more than scared that I would get, you know, yelled at. My local shop I'm okay with, but if I'm in town and I'm going into shops that I would normally have went into, and people are different now. They know a lot of people are a lot kinder and all that, but a lot of people are stressed if they're waiting in a queue and then somebody just breezes up and walks in the door. And then of course it's the cute doggy, so people want to pet the cute doggy, and you're at that disadvantage where you're trying to be nice to somebody, saying no, please don't touch the dog, and you're trying to get the dog to keep moving. It's quite anxious. Like, and I would be a very confident, competent traveler. Like, I'm a very solution oriented person, but I have no solutions. I communicate with my council on a regular basis on different access issues in Sligo Town, and it's going, if you do A, B, C, D, this will work. I have nothing, and that's what's scaring me, is the fact that I have absolutely nothing to offer. I've got an appointment now in July in the hospital, and I don't know how I'm going to get there. It's because it's in Letterkenny, it's in Donegal, so I don't know how I'm going to get there. I haven't seen my family in over 10 weeks. I'm terrified of getting on a bus here and bus, because again, I don't know what the seating arrangements are. I don't know what the capacity will be. Like, I'll make arrangements in advance, but I'm still concerned of getting on public transport, and I would be a very competent traveller. You know, I would be on the bus on a regular basis. I would be out and about on a regular basis, and I just have that thing now of not wanting to even touch the traffic light because I'm concerned of things, and I'm sanitizing my hands like every time I touch a light. Like,
yeah, a lot of I guess it's going to be a strange time ahead for everybody as we go into this this new normal. So we're coming up on 3:30, and we're going to wrap this session up very shortly because I know some people have to go to other sessions shortly. But just before we do that, let's take one more hand in the audience. If someone has been sort of holding their hand up for a long time and wants to maybe make a quick comment, and then I'm going to quickly just go around the panelists for some sort of closing thoughts. There's been some really great engagement today, and it's definitely one that I think Glenn and I want to see how we can take this further, because in some ways we've only been scratching the surface and we need to get into more of the specifics. So anybody with their hand up, Glenn, who's been sort of sitting there for a while?
I've got Lisa Redford. You just need to unmute yourself, Lisa, to be able to ask a question.
All right, Lisa. You might just have to.
Yeah.
We have you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Lisa. How are you?
Fine, thank you. Yeah, a couple of quick points. One, I'm in sort of similar situation to Jackie, except I'm a long cane user, not a guide dog user. I've got 2 local shops that are really helpful. Fortunately, I do have a partner as well, but he's at work a lot, so I go out on my own still. And again, going back into works occasionally too. But with the point about lorries and things in the road, and really we need to get communication to people that as long as people wash their hands afterwards, if they're guiding or wipe their arm or something, if they're being guided or guiding someone around a lorry or around some roadworks, they are not going to catch the virus. There is so much paranoia about it. It boils my blood sometimes. I think people really need to be sensible, but need to relax. I had somebody guide me around a lorry and I said, oh, thank you for giving up your social distancing. And the person just said, no worries, this is far more important.
Yeah, and actually, it's interesting you mentioned that. I had something of a similar experience the other day when I was out and somebody gave me a hand and I just said, thanks a million. And she said, it's just nice to see people again. So yeah, I think there's some interesting things happening around that. Okay, I'm going to very briefly just go around our panel just for any sort of final thoughts that they may wish to make. And again, want to thank our panel sincerely. So let's start off with Kevin and the National Council for the Blind here in Dublin.
Thanks, Stuart. Really wonderful session. It was great to hear everyone's ideas, and it really is the hot topic. What I'm hoping happens in Ireland in the coming days and weeks, that the public health officials begin to analyse the restrictions and do the risk assessments that I was talking about earlier in terms of cited guide in any context, and as well as engagement with local authorities or councils, because there is a debate beginning to rage around the reallocation of street space, and that does cause great fear and anxiety with ideas of tables and chairs outside business premises popping up everywhere, and that has to happen in one aspect to allow business to function again, but it must be done with strict consultation and enforcement. And just finally, from tomorrow, NCBI on our website will have some advisory guidelines for anyone who is blind or vision impaired who is in employment, or anyone who is an employer who provides employment to somebody who's blind or vision impaired, just around some advisory steps that can be followed. They'll not answer all of the questions, but hopefully they'll go some of the way. And again, Stuart, thanks for having us on the webinar this afternoon.
Kevin, we thank you very much for your inputs. I know you're under time pressure, so really, really value you coming along today. And check out ncbi.ie. It sounds great stuff going on the website there from tomorrow. Taylor from over in the UK, Guide Dogs UK, any closing comments or closing thoughts as you finish up today?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I think the big thing to keep in mind is that as we all start to develop answers or try to develop answers to all these questions, different people are going to have different comfort levels. What works for one person isn't going to work for the next person. And that's why we as organizations need to have so many, different tools and options, and be able to say, okay, if we're not comfortable with this, let's try this. And to that same point, make sure you're advocating for yourself, really communicate, speak up, tell people what you need and how they can help you. Or if you're fine and you don't need help, make sure you've got your cane with you if you have one. If not, you can get one from RNIB. A symbol cane, if you've not used a long cane before, don't go out without instruction. But and if you have any other questions, Guide Dogs does have a COVID sight loss helpline. Can I give that number out, Stuart?
Sure thing, please do, yeah.
It's 0800-781-1444. And that's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Excuse me, you can call and if you have any questions, and we can try and direct you or get you to the people within Guide Dogs who can help. If you are already working with us, our local community teams are still up and running. We are not actually in our offices. We're all at home in our own little home offices, but we're still on the phone. So if you have any questions or concerns, please get in touch with us.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. And 0800-781-4444 Guide Dog UK COVID helpline, which sounds a great thing altogether. Victoria, how are you feeling at the end of it all?
I think the main points that, well, first of all, thank you for having us all on. But I think the main points that came from today is definitely, I think self-advocacy is very important, in knowing like when to ask for help and just kind of advocate for yourself. But one thing that I did think about when we were having the discussion is, people wanting to stay 2 meters apart, and that's totally understandable. It is the guidelines. But one thing I have found is that the governments have not really taken people with disabilities into account. I think that's, we're all following government guidelines, and even with the issue of the lady who said that, they're not letting her and her husband in to a shop, even though they live together. So obviously, they should be allowed into a shop together. So I feel like if the government kind of gave more advice and outline on that, that would help. And at the same time, I think we're all adjusting to a new normal. So it's, we're all kind of finding different ways that work for us. But it's all about us working together as a population, really, to find solutions to different things.
All right, Victoria, thanks so much for your contributions today. Matthew, any closing thoughts?
Yes, just to say this has been a lovely conversation today, and thank you very much everyone for coming together and talking. I'm looking forward, following on from my introduction at the beginning, to getting back to a space where I am living and working more independently again, and I don't have to ride this out with the sacrifices of being with my family. I'm lucky to be here in the short term, though. But just to reiterate a few points, there are so many responsibilities on us if we're to ask for society's help and inclusion, and that's responsibility to show that we're complying with the guidelines where reasonable, that we are maintaining hygiene, that we are using our mobility correctly and properly, and that we are practicing self-advocacy. And there are a lot of people who struggle with those things, and I do think this points out that there needs to be the question of provision asked in the short to medium term to help people have the full mobility and advocacy that everybody deserves. Just to point out canes as well, I know a lot of local authorities in the UK will provide canes to people who are registered as blind or partially sighted in their local area. They obviously don't want to tell you about it because local authorities have not much money, but that is there. And the duty of society is obviously to act in the spirit of the Equality Act as it is here in the UK. And thinking in the bigger picture as well, this is a lot to take in, and something I've had to remind myself of repeatedly recently is that this is a big picture, and I need to remember, and we all need to remember, to take a moment to be mindful and love ourselves and take care of ourselves.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a really good point. Just take that little bit of time out, and maybe sometimes things don't run as normal every day, and just be nice to yourself. Give yourself a break. Be nice to those around you. Very important. Jackie, closing comments.
Yeah, I agree with everybody's thing of the advocating as well. Look, I would have always been in contact with Sligo County Council anyway, and I'm in contact now with the business sector just to share my kind of own experience of how things are going to change. And again, I don't want business to not open, but it's so important. And again, having something that a white cane, symbol cane, lawn cane, something to identify, because this is so important. It's for us, it's what we have to do to help the public understand that there's a sight issue here that we're not going to get yelled at. Because again, I've had experience of people telling me this. So no, and it's very, very, and I'm really interested in the tag thing. I'd really be interested in getting one of them actually. It would be handy whenever I've got family back, that it'd be something that can be used.
You never know. If you chat nicely to Laura after the session, you never know. Asosa, I suppose just some closing comments, and maybe just how can we best protect ourselves as we start going out into the world a little bit more?
Yeah, well, I think the best piece of advice I have from what I've gathered from all the evidence that I've seen is the use of masks. Now, I don't think there are any clear studies that have been done, but it stands to reason logically, and the evidence has shown that these surgical masks do reduce, any kind of mask actually does reduce the risk of transmission of the virus.
Okay.
And I'm off to the hospital on Thursday, so I'm going to be trying it out myself.
Excellent. Okay, so masks are something to explore, and it's really interesting to hear you say that, of course, because there's been a lot of people talking here about whether they are useful or not useful, but I think generally the commentary seems to be saying a little more, yes, people should be using them. So Asosa, thank you so much for your input today. Very, very valued, and sorry you had some technical glitches, but we're delighted to have you back. Daniel, some closing comments?
Yes, so I think this has been really useful, and thanks for having me on the panel as well. And just really, I would say, be positive at the end of the day. You know, there's a lot of negative responses out there. There's a lot of negative. Try and find the positives where you can, and actually look at the advice and guidance given by your national sight loss organisations. You know, whether that's guide dogs, whether that's RNIB, but also have a look at your local services, your local sight loss charities in your local area, because there is a lot of them that are doing a lot for people at the moment that have, even if it's simple things as going out and maybe getting people shopping. If you're not confident getting out, have a look, and definitely, you know, maybe have a look at the local sight loss charities. The RNIB actually have a Sightline directory, which you can go onto, and you can actually put your postcode in, or you can put your local area in, and it will bring up all of the local services that might be able to help you. So if you want to do that, it's sightlinedirectory.org.uk, and that will literally signpost you to any local sight loss charities in your area.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you very much, Daniel. And again, thanks for your contributions today. And by no means last but by no means least, rather, Laura and Tom and Rambletag. And I think, if nothing else today, there's lots more interest and excitement about Rambletag, Laura.
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much for letting us be a part of it. It's been great. There's lots of wee questions that were popping up, so I tried to answer a few, but if I've not, then people can contact me via our website or Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, and we're just at Rambletag if anybody wants to, you know, talk, or can give a phone number as well. Do you want that now?
Please, Laura. Yeah, absolutely.
07434 250712, and we can call you back if it's costing you money. We can call you back, or send us a wee text and we'll call you. So yeah, we know that we're not like the big solving all the problems thing. You know, we've let people come to us and tell us that it's making them feel more comfortable, but we're one possible solution to making things a little bit easier or more comfortable for folk. A few people had seen the Button app and Neatbox app pop up a couple of times, so you might be interested in learning more about them and where they're available. And you know, it's about going into shops and them knowing that you have a disability prior and being able to help you, you know, get what you want easier. So yeah, like we happy to talk more if people want to contact us. We're all yours, and yeah, hopefully you'll experience it in train stations and things, and feel more confident getting help that way. Yeah.
Coming to a train station near you, as they say.
Yeah. We'll keep it all up to date on our Facebook and all that, so everybody knows where things are happening, and hopefully get a wee bit of, you know, Tom's on the case to get some TV hopefully involved, and you know, get it. Just we need to let people know they're available prior, so that they're prepared to try something new as well. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura. And Tom, any quick parting words?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Oh, I'm back on. Fantastic. Sorry about that interruption there, but the doctor insisted on speaking to me. I would say to anyone, if you haven't experienced or you don't know about the Rambo tag, have a look in their website, and if you fancy trying one, they don't cost the earth. Get a shot of it and see if it might be for you. It's a simple, easy option, but with all this business going on, it might just give you that wee edge and make you feel a wee bit more confident, and hopefully it can, you know, do something to helping us through this situation that we're in.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thanks to all our panelists. It's been a really engaging conversation. I think everybody has given Glenn and myself a significant amount of work to do after this, but we're going to look at how we can take this topic further, because there's no doubt there's a lot more to talk about. And as I said earlier, we've only scratched the surface of the last hour and a half. We'll be putting a recording of this session onto our YouTube channel, so you will find it there shortly. And we're back next week, by the way, with Dancing Dots, Braille music and music technology as part of our webinar Wednesday. If you're interested in music and all things music technology, that's coming up next Wednesday at 2 p.m. here as part of Webinar Wednesday. My thanks to Carl and Glenn, who kept a hugely good eye on the chat and hands. And I know we didn't get through lots and lots of people, and sorry if we didn't get to you. There's just so much we had to cover today, but I hope you found the session useful. And as I think Matthew said, and I think it's really important, stay kind, give yourself a break, be kind to each other, stay safe and stay well, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Just a bit of housekeeping, just to disappear. Before we disappear, I'm going to post all of the chat on the Sight and Sound website. It might take me a day or so to find out how to do that sensibly, but there's so much content in this chat box over the last hour and a half that I don't think it should be lost, particularly telephone numbers and signposts. So we'll do that. And yes, Stuart, we've got lots to do because we're going to do a follow-up session and try and get some agencies involved. So I hope to see as many of you has been on again sometime in the very near future. Thanks very much.
Thanks a million, Glenn. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe.
Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.